Welcome to the Tennessee Performing Arts Center's Inside Out Podcast. Today, we discuss the Broadway touring production of Pretty Woman with cast member Graham Keen and local community partner Sarah Childress of the Nashville Film Festival. Well, thank you again, Sarah and Graham, for joining us today for our Inside Out podcast. I would love for you to introduce yourselves and talk about what you do. Graham, what you do in this show, and Sarah, what you do in our Nashville community. And we'll start with you, Graham.
Awesome, thanks. My name's Graham Keen, and I was born and raised here in Nashville. I went to CPA, and I was involved in theater here in town growing up. And then I went to school in New York at Wagner College. I got a degree there in music theater and graduated. And I've been really fortunate to have worked in the theater industry ever since. Done a couple tours and worked at regional theaters all over the country, and have recently also started working as a choreographer as well, an associate choreographer. So kind of getting to get my hands in all sides of the business, which has been really exciting. And then just earlier this year, I joined the national tour of Pretty Woman. So I'm a swing, and I cover 6.5 ensemble tracks.
Wow.
It keeps life very exciting. Every day is an adventure, and you never quite do the same show twice. So it's been really fun, and I'm really, really excited to be here in Nashville. I've never gotten to tour through TPAC, and but it feels really special. I did my first show ever when I was 7 years old in the Johnson Theater with my mom.
Wow.
So it feels really, really full circle to be back in that building and doing theater where I fell in love with theater. It's really cool.
That's great. Sarah?
So I'm Sarah Childress, and I'm currently the Education and Engagement Manager for the Nashville Film Festival. And what brought me to Nashville after I spent 10 years in advertising was Vanderbilt, where I got my PhD. And so I taught at Vanderbilt English and Film Studies classes, went to Bowdoin for a little while to teach there, and then decided I just couldn't stay away from Nashville and moved back where I taught a little bit at Belmont, and then got involved with the Frist and with a Nashville Film Festival. And I am absolutely, completely thrilled to be here with y'all today to talk about this really dynamic and engaging and super fun musical.
Yeah, so let's start there. Let's start with the movie, because this is, of course, a musical that's based on a movie. And I remember I lived through it. I was there. The cultural phenomenon of Pretty Woman, the movie. Sarah, talk about that. Talk about the movie and its impact.
Cool. Well, if you don't mind, I'd love to start because I have a few little production tidbits that I'm not sure if everyone knows. I didn't know them. And like you, I was there when it happened. In fact, I was graduating high school right when Pretty Woman was released. But I didn't know actually that the origins of the film were actually based on a screenplay that was quite dark. Done by J.F. Lawton, who did the book of the musical with Gary Marshall. But the original film script that he did, which was titled 3000, actually had, believe it or not, Vivian as a cocaine addict who Edward asks her to stay clean for a week, and she's not able to do it. So he basically, the end of the film, as it was originally conceived, was he kicks her out of the limo, throws the $3,000 at her, and then drives off. So that was the origin of the film. Wow. We all know and love so well. And what happened was the producers actually ended up selling the screenplay idea to Disney and brought on Gary Marshall. And so the then president of Disney, Jeffrey Katzenberg, says, okay, we have to rewrite this as like a modern day fairy tale and a love story. And what's so interesting about Julia Roberts, who I don't know about y'all, but certainly as far as the film goes, like who could be Vivian but Julia Roberts for the film, that was really her breakout role. And she had won the role in the original 3000, but when it was given to Disney or sold to Disney, she lost the role. and she had to win it back, which is amazing. And she was actually competing against, let me see here, Michelle Pfeiffer, Meg Ryan, Drew Barrymore, Brooke Shields, Uma Thurman. And Gary Marshall had actually offered the role to Molly Ringwald, the 80s darling, who we all know and love. But Molly Ringwald turned it down because she didn't feel comfortable playing a sex worker. And they also offered it to Daryl Hannah, another beloved 80s icon. And she turned it down because she said it was degrading to women. So Julia stayed on, and Julia, we have to remember at that point, was only 21 years old. She'd been primarily in Mystic Pizza. Steel Magnolias hadn't been released yet at that point, but Gary Marshall, she sort of won over Gary Marshall. And so then she started to read for the casting for Edward. And interestingly, one of the people that she first read with, who kind of had the right of first refusal, was Al Pacino. What I think is I cannot imagine Al Pacino as Edward, like in a million years. But she read with him, and then also Charles Grodin, which I think is so wild, and Sam Neill. But Christopher Reeves, Denzel Washington, Kevin Kline, and Daniel Day-Lewis were also in contention. But Gary Marshall really wanted Richard Gere, and Richard Gere said, "No, thank you. I am not interested in this role whatsoever," because he says there wasn't a part there. Edward's just an empty suit, like even a goat could play him. And in fact, Gary Marshall later admitted that he had kind of underdeveloped the role of Edward for the film, which is why he really made a concerted effort to flesh him out for the musical, which I can go into more detail later. But it was Julia Roberts. So Gary Marshall brought her to New York to meet with Richard Gere. Richard Gere fell in love with her instantly. She said, "Please play the role." And he said, "Yeah, you got me."
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's such an amazing, I mean, it's amazing that the film ended up being what it was, but in a way I feel like it just attracted the right people, and so it really was a phenomenon. And in fact, speaking of that, and since you were asking about kind of its impact, I mean, it was a worldwide hit when it was released. It earned $463 million globally, which is an amazing return on a $14 million budget. So they're quite happy with that. And in fact, it was the third highest grossing film of 1990. It was, and part of that was, it was a populist hit. So this was people who loved the film, told their friends to go see it, then went back with their friends to go see it. And in fact, it sold the most tickets in the US ever for romantic comedy, 42 million tickets. And it remains Disney's highest grossing R-rated film, which is just extraordinary. And of course, as we know, Julia Roberts became a breakout star as a result of it. And two, since I love to think about, women's empowerment, at that point, she became one of the highest paid female actors in Hollywood, thanks to that great little boost. So it was a cultural phenomenon. And you can see that it still has legs. I mean, I was surrounded by people who were quoting the memorable lines from the film that the musical carries over, like before, like just one little tiny step ahead of the actors doing it. So you can see that this is a film that people really has touched people, and that they have taken to heart, and that they still want to continue to share with their friends and family and loved ones.
That's amazing. And so, Graham, what is the relationship between actor and film when you're doing a musical?
So to be fair, I wasn't involved in the original creation of this show. I joined the tour after it opened. But they do, I think with a piece like this, you come into it knowing everyone's going to be familiar with the material, right? And there's a degree of even the way the book was adapted to the musical. It's very true to the movie. Sometimes they adapt musicals and it takes a very different form. But this one, I would say, if you know the movie, you're going to get all your favorite lines and favorite moments, and it's all in there. And so they know that you're familiar and that you're going to carry some of that with you into this production. But the creative team, they're very open to letting people bring their unique personality and their individual spin on every role. And
because a lot of time has passed since, we're a different culture now, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really valid point. And I think what Sarah, you kind of mentioned that it was kind of a surprise breakout hit. And Like you were saying, Julia Roberts wasn't quite the name that we think of her as now yet when this happened. And so I think that because that's almost baked into the material itself, that it allows for the actor to really bring their unique self to what they're doing. Our lead, Olivia, she really does something different, I think, with the character that isn't what Julia did and isn't what, I think is exactly maybe what people are used to, but it really works and it really is her own and continues to make the piece something that's special. So I think everyone's kind of given that, liberty.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're a swing and you play. Tell us how many different roles you play, and then talk to us about what it's like what kind of notice you get. And have you ever played, like, say, had to go on 3 days in a row, 3 different characters?
Oh man, yeah, it's pretty wild. So yeah, I cover 6 tracks. And if for people who maybe aren't like super familiar with theater terminology and whatnot, every ensemble member has their own sort of trajectory within the show. So that's what we kind of call a track. They go from, you're on this number here in this song, and then you play this character in that next scene, and then you do this, so it is very kind of regimented what everybody does. So I have, I've done like 4 different tracks in 1 week.
Wow.
Sometimes 2 in the same show. I've done, actually my debut performance with this company was in Los Angeles, and I went on mid-show for somebody who had an injury. So he went out in the middle of the show. I stepped in during intermission, finished the show in his track, and things like that. I was on for 1 track, and then mid-show somebody had an injury, so then I had to kind of absorb both of the tracks, for the rest of the show, because the other swing was also on. So it can be crazy. I've sometimes generally we'll have kind of a schedule for the week. For example, like this week I sort of know exactly what I'm doing supposedly Tuesday through Saturday. But then, that can change at the drop of a hat. Sometimes I'm on my way to the theater and I get the text from stage management that I'm on for somebody else, or I thought I wasn't going to be on and now I am on. So you really don't always get a lot of notice. And it's kind of, for me, it's one of the really fun things about my job. I've been in the business for a good almost like 14, 15 years now. And fortunately, I think I'm in the right headspace where it's exciting and it's not scary, but it can be. It can be.
I think that is exciting. Well, So Sarah, what are your thoughts on the musical version, the musical adaptation?
Oh, I absolutely, sorry, I'm like grasping for words just because I'm so excited about it. I so love it. And it was so interesting to me because as a film person, it's a very different experience from watching a film. And I wanted to bring up a point related to that, and also a point related to something that you had mentioned earlier, Kristin, about, like a lot of time has passed and we are a different culture. And that's something I think that the musical really takes seriously and addresses and works with so powerfully, because exactly as Graham was saying, the musical absolutely holds on to what the fans love about the original. I mean, what we all love about the original, while also evolving the central character. I feel like. So the Vivian and Edward that I experienced last night at the musical is very different from the Vivian and Edward I experienced in the film. So for example, Vivian in the musical has so much more explicit agency, power, and capacity to act. And also a gift that the musical creators have given to us and that the performers give to us is an exhortation kind of at the very beginning, which says that also gives us as the viewers and really participants in the musical agency and decision-making power too. So there's a specific line that's laid out at the very beginning that's a damsel in distress or hero on a quest, you decide. And so it's an opportunity to reframe Vivian's trajectory and also giving us the power and the opportunity opportunity to interact with that, to be a part of that, that we are also a part of her journey too, deciding like how to interpret it. And as I mentioned earlier, Richard Gere was kind of turned off by the original Edward, and Gary Marshall was like, yeah, sorry, dude, I actually kind of did underwrite you. And so he really took some pains to flesh Edward out as a character. He has greater dimensionality. He's more emotionally expressive. He has like a deeper sense of heart. And we can really understand how Vivian has significantly impacted his life. And so this is one of the things that I think that this musical format really does, because the songs are so crucial and important. I mean, obviously it's a musical, but the music is so important, because what struck me was when I'm watching the films ask us to infer a lot of information based on visual cues. So even though early cinema, and I mean like 1895 through like 1910, was based on theater and vaudeville. So you have films that looked very theatrical. But as film language developed and camera positions changed and continuity editing was developed, we developed in film acting a much more subtle style. And so we essentially created a film language that is more realistic. So if you think about how you work and how you maneuver through the world, like most of the information that we get about other people comes from either what they tell us or what we intuit from their body language. Same thing in film. And so in the original Pretty Woman, we're really asked to infer a lot about what Vivian and Edward are feeling for one another, their hopes, their dreams, basically their interiority. But what's so beautiful about the music in Pretty Woman the musical is that it provides us with a voice to this character interiority. So we have more direct access to the character's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and hopes. It just gives us greater insight into who they are. And they're literally like changing before our eyes, growing, developing. So it gives us a sense of, as a theater audience, a more direct access to that character development that we kind of have to guess at in the film. And so it makes it a really sort of satisfying and emotional and interactive experience, seeing these characters and the journeys that they're going through, everything that they're experiencing on stage.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Graham, how does it feel to be in, I mean, we mentioned earlier that it's fun. It's a fun musical. Is this different than some of the other shows that you've done as far as what it feels like for the whole cast and then performing for audiences like Nashville?
Yeah, there is kind of, Sarah mentioned earlier, like people are kind of one step ahead of the show sometimes. It really is, it's really cool, the responses we get from audiences all over the country. Like every city we go to, they're like almost laughing and cheering for some of the lines and the moments before we even get to them. It is very rewarding, because it's something that is so beloved to so many people. So it's a wonderful feeling to be a part of something like that, and the energy and the love that you feel from the audiences. It's really special. And here in Nashville, I mean, we've just opened last night, but the audience, it's already been really, really fantastic. I think that also the score, because Bryan Adams wrote this score with Jim Valance, and I just think there's something about the sound of this show that really suits Nashville audiences. You can already kind of feel the response. It's just really kind of special and fun. And even the nature of the character, somebody like Vivian she finds her way to LA, and kind of the crux of the show about really just searching for, she has a dream, she has a vision for what she wants her life to be. And that story can be transplanted here to Nashville so easily too. It's a feeling that energy that's in the city. And I really think it suits this city and these audiences. Yeah, it's been really exciting. And we all as a company, I mean, it's really wonderful to feel that love back on the stage. It's palpable.
And Sarah, what's your feeling on sort of the reception and the translation of the the musical, movie to musical here in town?
Oh, well, I love all the points that Graham was making. In fact, it was like, wow, I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that kind of, so many people talk about, the chemistry between Edward and Vivian, and the chemistry between the actors, or, whether it be on film or in the musical. But there's also, the very palpable chemistry between and within and among like the audience itself. And it was kinetic. I mean, there was like an electricity in the air, and it did feel familiar and exciting. So absolutely. And as far as the film goes, I'll share an anecdote. I was actually driving to the first with a friend of mine who had seen the movie, who loves the movie, and has seen the musical actually in New York. And she said, yeah, the really great thing is they didn't mess it up. I mean, the transition from the film to the musical in terms of just preserving the love. And it really is just, you can tell, just a labor of love. I mean, that part of it is really something you can feel too, not only in the adaptation from screen to stage, but also in each performance. I mean, everyone on stage seems to be taking care of each other and also taking care of us and love. I mean, and it's palpable. People were just getting so excited and sort of like, you could see them connecting with individual actors and individual performances and individual roles. And there's one character who I'll let you find out for yourselves if you haven't seen it yet, who kind of pops up in all these like fun and interesting places. And it's just, it is really such an incredible experience to have that live theater experience, which again, as somebody who spends most of her time watching films, it's intoxicating. I mean, I get a high off of watching film, but nothing like this.
And well, Graham, what do you hope, is there anything that you hope that people go away with when they come to see the show?
Yeah, I mean, of course, always, we just hope that people have a good time. I think that theater is one of the things that's so special about it is that it is communal. And of course you can go into a movie theater and watch a movie with a crowd, and it's similar, but there's something about seeing a musical where the audience is reacting together, and there's nothing like it. And especially after the last couple of years, I think we still feel that from audiences, that people are just really grateful to be together in these beautiful theaters and experiencing live theater. It's just a gift. And I think kind of something that we touched on a little bit, the story that this musical is about, has a powerful female hero, and I think it's presented in a way that's really unique in the fact that nobody, of course she's a sex worker, and there's nothing, it's never presented in a way that is judgmental, or it's just presented in a really unique way that allows her to go on her journey to pursue her goals and her dreams and her life in a way that I think when it came out originally in the 90s was impactful. And again, in the way that it's been adapted to a musical, I also find it to be really meaningful. I hope that people leave the show feeling like they saw something that they loved originally in a new way, and they got to re-experience it.
And Sarah, what are your thoughts on that from a perspective of, someone who really wants people to get the most out of their experience?
Oh, sure. Well, and actually, if you don't mind, I really wanted to underscore something that Graham just said, which I think is really, really important, and something that is a bit of a shift from the film to the musical that gets to the kind of the evolution of Vivian's character that I was talking about. So something that the film does that's really interesting when we think about the fact that it was produced in 89, released in 90, is that unusually we have a female character who's expressing her sexuality on screen, first as a sex worker, of course, but also just as a woman. And she's not shamed for that or punished for that at the end, because often when you see sex workers or very sexual females or, sexualized independent females, in film, they're either punished, domesticated, or killed narratively. That's just kind of the general trajectory. I mean, I'm generalizing here, but still, but that doesn't happen to Vivian. Like Vivian in the film is able to realize her dreams, but cinematically, she's put through some pretty gnarly stuff that personally I find icky. So for example, what the film does is it subjects her to a series of essentially stares. So in the very beginning, we see her first fragmented, like she's fragmented to embody. That's how we're introduced to her. Like she's a black bikinied bottom who rolls over. Then she's lacy breasts. Then she's got her boot. And then when we finally see her, and especially when she enters Edward's world, she's constantly being ogled by men or dismissed or judged by women. And so the film seems to say that, okay, she develops, or we see her developing from who she was into who she becomes as the quality of the stares change from judgment or ogling to admiration and appreciation. But as a woman, I'm like, okay, that being looked at is still never, like, that's not an expression of a woman's agency and empowerment. It's just that she's looked at in a different way. And so it seems to me this gaze heavy motif kind of undercuts the idea that Vivian, who she really is, matters. It really seems to be more important, like who she appears to be or who she seems to be, and how she's able to now navigate Edward's world more confidently and in a more sophisticated way. But in the musical, that's completely done away with, because we do have a strong female character that isn't just gauged by how she looks and how she appears to have transformed, but rather we see our Vivian on stage enacting in very strong ways through the music that she sings, but also the certain actions that she does, which has changed from the film. One, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's like, it's a very important moment that has changed quite dramatically from the film. And so it is a wonderful way to see that, yes, here is a woman who is a full woman, a complete woman, a sexual woman, a strong woman, a vulnerable woman, an emotional woman, a hopeful woman. She is so much more complex and able to live more fully in this musical version than I think she was given a chance to do. But of course, it's been many years, but in the film.
Well, it sounds like everybody just needs to come and see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I want to thank Sarah and Graham so much for participating in our discussion today. And Graham, welcome back to TPAC. I'm glad that you're performing on Jackson stage. Now we'll have to get to the folk stage next.
Yeah, I gotta make the trifecta one of these days. Oh, it's just an honor to be here. Yeah, really. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Inside Out Podcasts are produced by the Tennessee Performing Arts Center and made possible with support from the Tennessee Arts Commission, the Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Nissan, and our presenting sponsor, Vanderbilt University. You can find all of our podcasts at tpac.org or on all of your favorite podcast platforms.